Another important data structure in Python is called a tuple. A tuple is very similar to a list as we have seen in the past in some simple small exercises. In this video, we'll dive deep into tuples and understand what operations we can perform on tuples in detail. The key difference between a tuple and a list is that we can't change the elements of a tuple. Okay, so tuples are called immutable. Immutable. Tuples are immutable data structures, while a list is mutable. This is a very important difference and the key difference between a tuple and a list. What does mutable mean? Mutable means you can change the elements. Mutable basically means you can change the elements of a list. You cannot change the elements of a tuple. Okay, so that's a except that more or less tuples and lists are very similar, but this is the most fundamental difference between a tuple and a list. Now let's go through some code and understand what operations we can run on tuples and how to create them and things like that. Okay, so the first thing is, how do you create a tuple? For tuples, we use the square brackets or parentheses as they're often called. Okay, so when I say t equals to empty, basically an open bracket and a close bracket, it creates an empty tuple, right? I can create a tuple of integers by just listing out the integers that I have, and when I print it, I get something like this. Okay, I can have mixed data types of when I create a tuple. So this is a tuple t where I have an integer, I have a string, an integer, and another string. It's perfectly valid. Okay, I can of course print it. There's something called a nested tuple, right? Which is within a tuple. So this is the tuple, right? This is the tuple. This is the outer tuple. Within this, I have an element which is 1. I have the second element which is a tuple itself, and my third element is a list, right? So this is the list, this is a tuple, and this is a simple element, right? So if I print it, I actually get it like this. I get the first element as an element, a single element, the second one as a list, the second one as a tuple, the third one as a list. So this is called a nested tuple. This is called a nested tuple because it has tuples in a tuple and it has lists in a tuple, right? So having learned this basic concept, now let's do something interesting. Okay, so let's assume I create a tuple t with just one word here, Satish, one of our engineers here. And if I just put it here, if I just put it in a parenthesis, when I say what is the type of t, it actually tells me that it's a string, not a tuple, even though I used the parenthesis. So to be sure that it's actually a tuple, you need to end it with a comma. So this is if you do not have this, see the difference between this line and this line is that there is no comma here and there is a comma here. That is the only difference. If you do not put a comma here at the end, Python will think that it's basically a string. Okay, if you put a comma, it knows that it's actually a tuple. So when you say type of this, you get tuple. Actually, you need not even use the parentheses. So if you write your t as this, okay, Python immediately understands, because there is a comma here, Python immediately understands that it's actually a tuple. Okay, so when you print the type of this, you actually get it as class tuple. Okay, so this is important. Okay, so the comma is the important part. When at the end, this is the most important part. So for example, if you have more than one element, right? If you have more than one element, then there is no problem. Let's say Satish and Varma. Okay, then you don't require a comma at the end. Here you don't require a comma. If you have two elements, it's perfectly alright. But when you have only one element, if you do not put a comma, it will think of it as string. This is a very interesting boundary case it's a boundary case between strings and tuples. Okay. Now, how do you access elements in a tuple? Very simple. It's just like your list. So suppose if I have a tuple like this, this is index 0, index 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? Now, when I say print t1, it prints Murali. Right? When I say print t minus 1, again, the indexing exactly works. This is -1, this is -2, -3, -4, and -5. So what is -1? -1 is Brahma. These are our team members, by the way. These are names of our team members. Similarly, I can have a nested. So I can index it either positive number going forward in increasing order or negative number from back to front. Okay. Having said this, now let's go and understand nested tuples. Suppose if I have a tuple like this, which is my first element or my 0th element is just a string ABC. my first element here, my first element is another tuple. So when I say print t of 1, it actually prints this whole tuple because this is a tuple within a tuple, right? So when I say print t of 1, I actually get the whole second element, which is a tuple itself. It will print the whole thing. If I want, let's say this element, if I want, let's say this specific element within this inner tuple, this is element 0, this is element 1, and this is element 2. So if I say print t of 1, 2, so the moment I say t of 1, it actually will now point to this part. Okay, it actually will point to this part now. Within this part, pick the second element. So it will print string. Is that clear? So this is one way of indexing a tuple within a tuple. Okay. Now slicing. The next important operation is how do you take slices of a tuple? It's very, very similar to the list that we learned a while ago. So imagine if I have a tuple like this, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I say print t 1 to 4. Okay, so this is item 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this will print this. So from 1 to 4, right? At 1, I have element 2. Okay, it will print 2, 3, and 4. So it will print up to the index. This is the end index, right? And this is the start index. It will print the start index. It will go up to n minus 1, just like in lists. It's exactly the same thing. I can also slice things using this. When I say minus 2, so this is minus 1 and this is minus 2, right? So it will go up to minus 2. So this is from start. So what does it mean? It from start up to minus 2. And what does it return us? It returns us the first 4 elements here. Okay, because up to minus 2, right? This is minus 1 and this is minus 2. So it's going up to minus 2. So it will print 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I just put a colon, this means go from start to end. It will print the whole tuple itself. This is very similar to what we saw in lists. Okay, nothing major there. Now the most important part is, while unlike lists, tuples are immutable. Okay, which means you can't change them. But if you try to change them, suppose imagine if I have a tuple like this. Okay, imagine if I have a tuple like this. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, this whole thing is 4. Okay, here I have my fourth element at index 4. I actually have a list. At index 4, I actually have a list. If I say t of 2 equals to x, which means I'm trying to change this 3 to x, it will simply give you a type error. Okay, and what does a type error read? Type error reads tuple object does not support item assignment, which means it won't let you assign an item. That's important. Now there is a small catch to this, which is very, very important. Now, instead of modifying my tuple, if I modify my list here, which is inside a tuple. So this is index 0, index 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If I say T41 equals to Satish, what does it mean whenever I say T4? T4 basically means it is referring to this list. In this list, I want to change the first element. Okay, it will let you do that. So if I change this and if I print, it will not give you an error. It will change the 6 to Satish. It lets you do that because a list is mutable. Because a list is mutable. If an element within a tuple is mutable, like a list, it will let you change it. That's an important distinction here. Having learned this, how do we concatenate tuples now? We can simply concatenate tuples by using the summation sign. Very, very simple. If I say 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6, I just get it. There's another very interesting operation here, which is this is basically a tuple. If I multiply it by 4, I get a tuple of length 4, where this item is repeated 4 times. This is like the repeat operation, multiplication. Here I'm saying take this tuple Satish, repeat it 4 times and create a new tuple called T. It's a very, very elegant way of creating tuples which are repetitions.